Hello, everyone. This is Giles Parkinson. I'm the editor of Renew Economy. Just letting you know that we will start the webinar very soon. I just wanted to sort of just tell you that welcome and you're in the right place. But we're just probably going to give it another 30 seconds to allow everyone to get on board. So just hang fire for about another 30 seconds, and then we'll get this show on the road. Okay, everybody. I think we're live now. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this latest webinar. The theme and the title of this webinar is Now is the Time for a Smarter Grid. And it's brought to you by Renew Economy and GridBeyond. And we've got a fantastic panel that I'll be introducing to you very shortly. A couple of housekeeping things, or just to sort of let you know what's going to happen. We're going to have a couple of presentations, and then we're going to open the floor up to Q&A. We've got a couple of polls running, so we'd like to get your interaction with that one. And we'd also invite you to provide some questions, and if you could do that through the Q&A, you'll see that there's a chat thing at the bottom of the screen. There's also a Q&A thing at the bottom of the screen. You're welcome to chat as much as you want, but if you do have a question, please put it in the Q&A one. We will check the chat box, but the Q&A just makes it easier just to sort of marshal them all and to answer your questions. Now, okay. So now let's get on to the thing. So my name is Giles Parkinson. I'm the editor of Renew Economy, and we've got three panelists and we've got two presentations. We have Gabrielle Kuiper, one of Australia's foremost energy experts, and a particular expert on DER, distributed energy resources or consumer energy resources, and a contributor to IEFA, the Institute of Economic and Energy Financial Analysis. And I don't think I've got that quite right. But anyway, Gabrielle will be joining us, and also Lisa Bork and Ed Ahmed from GridBeyond, the sponsors of this podcast. So look forward to hearing from their presentations. Of course, this is a really interesting time in the grid. Lots of discussions about the timing of coal closures, particularly with the Eraring. Origin AGM actually is on today, but we haven't actually heard much more advance from them. This spring, we're seeing so many new records being broken for the share of renewables, particularly with rooftop solar, which is challenging the business models of the existing fossil fuel generators and coal in particular. And one of the big questions is how to marshal all of these resources, how to make this a smarter grid, what should we be doing about it, and what should we avoid? And we've been reporting a lot of the interesting records that's been happening over the grid in the last couple of weeks, including a record of 71.5% renewables instantaneous for a 5-minute period, which happened just a couple of days ago, and rooftop solar reaching more than 100% of demand in South Australia. So that's just another landmark. And also just a couple of weeks ago, enough renewables could have been produced to actually meet 100% of the demand on Australia's main grid. Of course, that didn't happen for a bunch of reasons, economic constraints and network constraints, but we are getting very close to the stage where we're going to be managing that. Anyway, how do we manage that? A smarter grid is the requirement. So I'm going to start off by inviting Gabrielle Kuiper to make her presentation. Before I do that, once again, I remind people that to put a question, put it in the Q&A box. That would be our preference. And we've got a poll. The first poll is, How quickly can we get to a 100% grid, renewable grid? We've got a couple of answers: 2030, 2035, 2040, 2050, or never. Be interested in your feedback. And we're not talking about just instantaneous levels. We're actually sort of talking about the whole grid for the whole time, for the whole year. And I guess it's one of the questions: do we actually need to get to another 100%? But I guess that's another question. Anyway, I'm going to hand over to Gabrielle Kuiper, energy expert with IEFA and one of our best experts and most foremost advisors on the issue of distributed or consumer energy resources. Gabrielle, over to you.
Thanks so much, Giles. It's a delight to be here. Thanks to Renew Economy and GridBeyond for the opportunity to talk with you all this afternoon about growing the sharing energy economy. Before I dive in, I did want to acknowledge that I'm speaking from Gadigal land, and in light of the result on the weekend, wanted to reiterate what a number of clean energy leaders have said, which is going forward, it's really important that the clean energy industry works in partnership with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people to make sure that we get not only a sustainable, but also a just transition, and acknowledging that a lot of particularly large-scale wind and solar farms will be built on First Nations land. So on the 24th of November, Energy and Climate Change Ministers will meet in Perth. And as far as I'm aware, this is the first time they've actually had distributed energy resources as a line item on the agenda. So what I want to talk through today is a package of 6 measures that I think will change the game around distributed energy resources and the sharing energy economy. Before I go into those 6 recommendations, which are in a new report put out by the Institute for Energy Economics and Financial Analysis last week, we can hopefully put the link in the chat so you can download that report. I wanted to talk about the importance of DER. Everyone here is probably aware we have more solar on rooftops in Australia per head of population than any other country on earth. And we've already seen over $25 billion of household and business investment in those DER, in the rooftop solar, smart appliances, electric vehicles, battery storage and the like. And some of the numbers are on this slide, and there's a lot more numbers in the report. But despite this large investment and the even larger investment to come, and the fact that we've got now 21.5 gigawatts of rooftop solar alone, we're not realising the full potential of that DER, and there's been acknowledgement from the energy market institutions that distributed energy resources haven't had the policy and regulatory attention that is warranted by their significance in the NEM and the WEM now and into the future. I think there are many reasons why distributed energy resources haven't had the attention they deserve, but I think it's worthwhile talking about why we should sweat the small stuff. And I think one of the reasons why people have sort of been so much more focused on the large scale wind and solar farms and transmission and the integrated system plan is because rooftop solar and other investments like it have been seen as investments primarily for private benefit. And it's true, if you put rooftop solar on your house, it will pay for itself in 3 to 4 years. You'll get much lower bills as a result. However, unless you're off-grid, you're actually, by putting rooftop solar on your house or your business, you're contributing to the NEM infrastructure. And I think we have to change the way that we're thinking about these distributed resources. They're actually energy infrastructure. They're just distributed. And what I'm going to talk you through is some world-first modelling about what are the consequences of having saturation levels of distributed energy resources. So I was thinking about the fact that we're getting more and more solar into the grid. We'll soon have lots of EVs as large batteries on wheels. We'll have hopefully a lot of flexible demand and a whole lot of smarter appliances. And I thought, well, at some point, every rooftop that can have solar will have solar, and we'll have all of this flexibility in a smarter grid. And I wondered, what's the consequences of that? no one's ever examined what that might look like. So partnered with the very smart people at ITP Renewables, they did all the hard work of the modelling, and they produced a whole series of scenarios about what this might look like. So the pink duck on the left, everyone would be familiar with that. That's when you have abundant solar in the middle of the day, household demand from the grid goes to zero, and we're actually seeing negative prices increasingly in regions across the NEM, particularly in South Australia, but also now in other regions. The orange duck in the middle is what happens if that household, or if we've got a modelled residential suburb, if there are batteries behind the meter, obviously the abundant sunshine in the middle of the day gets stored in the battery, and that can bring down the 4 to 8 p.m. evening peak. What happens when you allow those batteries to trade? We define this as frictionless trading in terms of there would be no net cost to trading. And then in fact, you put the duck to sleep. So the 4 to 8 p.m. peak, which has been where the majority of the revenue has been for generators historically, basically declines between 67 and 92%. So that would suggest that, in fact, wholesale costs would fall proportionately. Now there's a whole lot of ifs and buts, and policy and regulation would have to support that change. But we should see wholesale prices fall substantially for all energy consumers. And this is the key point, that distributed energy resources are not just for private benefit, but they can benefit everyone. And it's not just in terms of the wholesale market, but there is similar modelling that shows that peak network demand in summer in particular will also fall. And we know that the distribution network costs are about 40% of households' bills. And so with better utilisation of the network and lower peak demand, our local poles and substations all having been built to cater for peak demand, then that should fall. Again, there's a whole lot of ifs and buts, and we have to particularly do EV charging smart to make sure that happens. But saturation levels of distributed energy resources should benefit everyone. And I wanted to show you, it's not just wonderful cartoons. Cara from IEFA did those great cartoons of ducks that have now gone global. There is serious modelling underneath it. I wanted to just assure any energy geeks on the webinar that it does exist. But it looks far more fun when you draw a duck over the top of it. I also wanted to make the important point that we'll never be totally self-sustaining through DER. It'll be an enormous proportion of the supply and the storage and the flexible demand. We will still need the broader grid, particularly in climate zones like Victoria, where you have lower solar irradiance in winter. So I've given you some examples of how distributed energy resources can benefit everyone in the grid as a whole through this sharing energy economy. And I want to talk about now how we can make that happen. You can't have a report these days without a good infographic. So this one summarizes everything we need. I'm going to take you through the 6 recommendations that go with it. The first and probably the simplest one is that we need to get DER technical standards governance right. As Giles knows, I wrote a piece for Renew Economy, published a couple of weeks ago, that takes readers through the lost years. We lost basically 3 years on setting DER technical standards and setting up the governance of that so we could have those in place. The AMC has now acknowledged that we do need new governance arrangements, and all credit to them for finally coming to that conclusion. And they have recommended to energy ministers several ways in which this could be done. We're supporting this to be an independent national body. It could be a work program within an existing body, not one of the energy market institutions, but another body. And this is so we can get all the DER technical standards set, not just for what we need now, but into the future, of which EV standards are particularly important. Then there are the static constraints on existing solar. So if you are installing solar on a house or a business around the country, you will generally have a 5 kilowatt export limit, even if you're, say, putting a 10 kilowatt household solar system in, which a lot of surprising numbers of people are putting in very large solar systems now, future-proofing for EVs or for batteries. What South Australian power networks have been ahead of the curve in putting in place flexible export ports, or what's known technically as dynamic operating envelopes. And they have been able to raise that static 5 kilowatt limit up to 10 kilowatts. And that will vary by time of day and by time of year, but they set it 24 hours in advance. When I first heard about this, I was like, that's fantastic. Maybe 60, 70% of the time, you'll be able to export double what you can export now. South Australian Power Networks modelling now shows that 98% of the time, households in South Australia will be able to double their solar exports. Now, that's because there's only a few hours of the year, basically in spring, where the grid is sufficiently constrained that they will need to lower those limits from 10 kilowatts. So that shows what a number of studies are now showing, the amount of capacity that's available in the distribution grid if we use it smarter. Similarly, we've had challenges with voltages. It was previously speculated that rooftop solar was causing high voltages in the grid. Some work that was commissioned when I was at the Energy Security Board showed that there are existing high voltages across the national electricity market. In fact, instead of sitting at 230, which is the standard, a lot of regions, they were sitting at more like 245. And the reason that you knew it wasn't solar that was causing this problem is a lot of those high voltages were in the middle of the night. So the Victorian government has done some fantastic work on this. They've really picked it up, run with it, worked with the DNSPs in Victoria, worked with their energy regulator there. And they've also calculated what the additional costs to consumers are of having these higher than standard voltages. And they've calculated that in an additional electricity supply alone, it's costing consumers in Victoria $30 million a year. Now, they've worked with the DNSPs and they've clawed back, they think, about $6 million a year of that, but there's still more to go. And you can imagine what that cost might be to consumers across the NEM, especially because electricity use is lower in Victoria because of their current high usage of gas. So we're suggesting that the Victorian government's investigated this very thoroughly and ministers should adopt their recommendations going forward, and we should get these voltages down as quickly as possible. Not only are there cost savings from reduced electricity supply, but you also get the capacity of exports increased by decreasing the voltages down to where they should be, plus your appliances last longer. So we don't know, but it's likely that there's quite a significant cost in people's appliances burning out earlier than they should have because these voltages have been run so high by the DNSPs. Those are the sort of two technical recommendations. Then there's a whole series of recommendations around flexible demand. So people will know of demand response as the historic term. Now we've got dance steps. They're shimmy, shed, shift and shape for different types of flexible demand over different timeframes. This, however, is not fundamentally new. And in fact, Energy Queensland has the largest sort of cohort of flexible demand with 850 megawatts in hot water and air conditioning that they can control. That's significant. The potential, though, is huge. So a recent highly recommended UTS report on hot water has a fast electrification scenario, which suggests we could unlock 22 gigawatts of electrified hot water that can be used as flexible demand. So how do we do this? First and foremost, we have to fix the wholesale demand response mechanism in two senses. We have to get AEMO to do more flexible baseline methods, and we have to allow households to participate and aggregate on that. We also need to allow households to ensure that households purchase appliances with demand response capability. And we also need a national strategy for flexible domestic hot water, as UTS has set out. Together with flexible demand, we need to fast track distributed storage. There's a great mechanism through the Commonwealth's Small Business Energy Incentive. It's currently slated to run for 1 year. We think it should run for 3 years. And there's also the possibility of having behind the meter storage in the capacity investment scheme. Most importantly, and it'd be good to possibly chat about this in the questions, is how can the Commonwealth Government and other governments support behind the meter storage? So I'm talking about batteries for households and businesses. Is that best done through the SRES or through another mechanism? And we also need to unlock the value for batteries on wheels. Two very difficult ones to finish off, and I am winding up, Giles. The first and very, very important one is to think that when we designed the NEM, there was an assumption that as we had economic growth, then electricity use would increase. And so we would need to build more poles and wires and substations. The whole foundation of network revenue remuneration is on a rate of return on a regulated asset base. But over the last decade, we've seen network utilisation go down, and obviously network utilisation is changing dramatically with two-way flows and the integration of DER. So we need to rethink how we remunerate our DNSPs. This is going to be really, really hard. There's going to be major objections from network owners, which include China's State Grid and a whole lot of very, very large and powerful investors. But for me, it's a, if not now, then when. We really need to take this seriously. The final one, which will also be unpopular in some circles, is the idea of a governance review of the NEM. Now, we've had governance reviews in the past, and the question would be, why would we do another one? And I think we now have a 43% emissions reduction by 2030 in our Commonwealth legislation. We have a government target for 82% renewables by 2030. We want to make sure that we've got fit for purpose governance. I don't think we need a drawn out years-long Royal Commission type review, but a quick 6-month review to make sure that we've got everything we need both to integrate large scale and small scale renewables. And then I will just wind up by saying some people might have seen the news today from Aware Super. They are committing $300 million as an initial investment into rooftop solar and battery storage, and they're looking at investing up to $2 billion with Birdwood Energy. And their CEO was quoted as saying, this is a faster, cheaper way to get to net zero. And I could not agree more. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gabrielle. That's a fantastic presentation. Looked as absolutely terrific. We're just about to go into our second presentation now, just very briefly. We've got some results from our first poll. How quickly can Australia get to 100% renewable? Single choice. Interesting. So I think the bulk of people, 61%, think we can get there by 2040, or so 72% think we can get there by 2040. 18% reckon it's going to take another decade, and 9% say we will never get there. Interested to know how close those people think we can get. So that's really interesting. I think we're going to have another poll question up here pretty soon, which is about the sort of the control of rooftop solar. But we'll see that one soon. We've got lots of questions. There's people on chat. If you do have a question, though, best to put it on Q&A, but I will jump into the chat panel. Just a very quick one. First one, Gabrielle, just ask one question. It comes from Murray. Hi, Murray. Hope you are well. Should we be calling this DER or CER? Distributed energy resources or consumer energy resources? Or maybe just people power stuff?
Look, I think it's very important to acknowledge that a lot of these resources are owned by consumers, and people are putting, households and businesses are putting their own hard-earned capital into these devices. However, distributed energy resources is an internationally renowned term. And while some people think it changes the whole discussion by calling them CER instead of DER, I think it just adds to the confusion, and I'm not sure. I think there are more important things we need to do to put consumers at the center of the energy market than changing acronyms.
Okay, then. I'd now like to introduce Ed Ahrens and Lisa Borg from GridBeyond. They're going to make the next presentation, very much on the theme of now is the time for a smarter grid. I'm not too sure who's going first. Is it Lisa or Ed? It's going to be Lisa, who's a little bit under the weather.
I'm going first.
Oh no, you're going first. Ed's going first. Okay, Ed's going first. Over to you, Ed.
Thank you. Just share my screen. Hope you can all see my screen. Okay. Well, first of all, thank you, Gabrielle, for a fantastic presentation. I've learned a lot from your presentation. I love those duck charts and putting the duck to sleep. But yeah, hello, everybody. This is Ed Ahmed, Regional Director for GridBeyond. I'm going to take you through how the energy markets are evolving, how energy costs are becoming more volatile, and the impact to businesses, and lastly, what can businesses do about it. Starting off with the topic, how energy markets are evolving and changing, we are expecting a 200% growth in power demand in the NEM. Now, this basically suggests a significant increase in the demand for electricity. And it could be due to various factors such as increased industrial activity or the electrification of sectors such as transportation sector. And addressing this growth would require, again, significant investments in new power generation capacity and infrastructure to meet the rising demand. The second one is phasing out the thermal resilience or coal. This refers to a shift away from coal-based power generation. Now, coal is a fossil fuel that is a major contributor to greenhouse gas emissions and environmental issues. Now, phasing it out in favor of cleaner energy sources like renewable energy is a common strategy to reduce carbon emissions as well as combating climate change. What we'll also see in the future is the 2/3 of the generation will be a mixed source from intermittent generation. So this basically implies that a significant portion of the electricity generation is expected to come from intermittent sources such as solar and wind. Now, while these sources are clean and renewable, they are quite dependent on weather conditions and the time of the day. So managing the intermittency and ensuring that the power supply is reliable, it will require grid upgrades, it'll require storage solutions and demand side management. Last but not the least, you'll also look at, you'll see increase in reliance on distributed generation and storage. So distributed generation basically refers to the generation of electricity closer to the point of use. Often with smaller scale systems like, for example, rooftop solar panels and storage. So storage, on the other hand, involves storing the excess energy generated from the solar for later use. Both distributed generation and energy storage are essential components for managing intermittent energy sources and creating a more resilient and sustainable energy system. In summary, these points suggest that there's a significant shift towards a more sustainable and modernized energy sector with a focus on clean energy sources, adapting to intermittent generation, incorporating distributed generation and storage to ensure a more reliable and resilient power supply. Now, these changes also do align with the broader global trend of transitioning to a cleaner and a more sustainable energy system to address environmental and energy security concerns as well. Now, if you look at the changes in the energy sector, how does that impact the energy costs? So what we're going to see in the future is more price volatility. But to start off with, let's look at the wholesale cost. The wholesale cost is a significant component of the total cost that's reflected in an electricity invoice, about 65%. Now, as the wholesale cost increases, it could also have an impact on the marginal cost of production. Now, the marginal cost of production is the additional cost incurred when you're producing one more unit of the same product. Now, it can include costs related to energy, labor, or raw materials. But if the wholesale cost of energy is expected to increase, it can definitely lead to a higher marginal cost of production. And when the wholesale costs fluctuate the way it does, it can also lead to price volatility. This means that the prices of products or services can change quite frequently and dramatically, making it quite challenging for the businesses to set stable prices and manage their profit margins, basically. There is technology available that can play a crucial role in optimizing purchasing and managing costs. Businesses can use data, procurement softwares, and supply chain management tools to make those informed decisions about when and how to make the purchase. These tools can help. But it's also, I think, important to look at why the wholesale prices are actually increasing in the market. So the rising wholesale prices can be attributed to a combination of factors. But to start off with, we're seeing tighter supplies of gas driven by global geopolitical affairs. So natural gas is a crucial energy source for power generation. And there's geopolitical tensions, disruptions in gas supplies, or shifts in production. That can lead to reduced availability as well as increased prices. For example, if a major gas producing country is experiencing any kind of a war-like situation or a conflict, that's going to disrupt the production. It can limit the supply, and as a result, it can drive up the prices. The second one, proportion of fossil fuel and nuclear plants is decreasing. So many regions around the world are now shifting away from fossil fuels and nuclear power as well to reduce carbon emissions and combating climate change. As older fossil fuel as well as nuclear plants are retired, they may be replaced by more expensive and cleaner energy sources. And transitioning to those new energy sources can be costly, and that could also impact prices. The third point over there is increasing the levels and proportion of intermittent renewables generation. So we're talking about the rise in intermittent renewable energy sources such as the wind and solar that I spoke about earlier. That can also lead to fluctuations in energy supply because when renewables produce electricity, they can displace the conventional, the conventional power generation and affecting the economics of the existing power plants and potentially leading to price volatility. And last but not the least, the increasing electrification of new sectors. So the electrification of various sectors, such as transportation, that can also impact the demand. That could increase the demand of electricity. And when the demand rises, it can put pressure on the energy supply, potentially leading to higher prices, especially during the peak periods. Now, how does this price volatility impact businesses? Now, let's look at that. So firstly, there are three main impacts to businesses, as you can see from your screen. Reducing energy costs is a key concern for businesses to improve profitability. The second one, maintaining a reliable power supply is crucial for business operations to ensure the power supply security. And third one, the last but not the least, sustainability is now becoming increasingly important for businesses to meet their environmental, social, and corporate responsibilities. Now, we've seen earlier how the landscape's changing. The landscape of the energy industry is quite evolving and rapidly evolving, as I've said. As part of these changes, the grid operators are recognizing the value of flexibility in the energy system. Now this shift towards flexibility can basically benefit both commercial industrial consumers and the broader energy market. So we'll talk a bit more about the grid flexibility now. That grid flexibility is basically where the grid operators are increasingly recognizing that the importance of flexibility in managing the energy supply and the demand. So this basically means that being able to quickly adjust and adapt to changes in the energy generation and the consumption. Now, with the integration of renewable energy sources like the wind and solar, which can be variable because it's weather dependent, and also coupled with that, the desire to reduce reliance on fossil fuels, the grid must become more flexible to ensure reliability. But the enhanced grid flexibility has actually opened up avenues for commercial industrial consumers to generate income and also achieve cost reductions by engaging in energy market activities. Specifically, C&I consumers, they can benefit from participating in energy markets in a lot of different ways. Gabrielle mentioned that, but demand response, that is one of the best ways the C&I consumers can benefit by participating in energy markets. Businesses can basically, for an example, curtail their energy usage during peak demand periods when the electricity prices are really high, and in return they can earn some revenue. Now, overall, the evolving energy landscape provides C&I consumers with more ways to be active participants in the energy market, while also realizing financial benefits. However, it does require the businesses to be, I guess, more proactive in managing their energy usage and considering how they can contribute to the grid flexibility. And if I look at what does a good energy strategy look like in today's world, we're talking about a good energy strategy should incorporate a consistent and dependable energy supply, preparedness for potential failures through contingency measures, affordability aligned with marginal operating costs, and last but not the least, alignment with the environmental, social, and governance targets and objectives. Now, those are the targets. Now, to understand how to engage effectively in the energy markets and to achieve those goals that's set in your energy strategy, my colleague Lisa Bork will guide you through the process of that participation. Over to you, Lisa.
Thanks, Ed. I'm going to share my screen. Thank you. Hi, guys. While I'm finding the slides, Giles has obviously introduced me. So I'm Ed's colleague, Lisa. I'm the sales director here in Australia for GridBeyond. Just conscious of time, we want to allow enough time for questions and whatnot at the end. So I'm going to breeze through these slides, and I'm not feeling the best today. So it gives me more incentive to breeze through.
Hey, Lisa, just before you do that, can I just invite Sam just to put the other poll question up if you're listening? Yeah, there you go. There's another one. Should AEMO have the power to switch off rooftop solar? Look, it's a bit of a blunt question, and it's probably it's probably more sophisticated answer is required. But anyway, we thought we'd throw it up there. Lisa, sorry to interrupt. Please go ahead.
Not at all, no problem. So in terms of everything obviously Gabrielle and Ed have just covered, and where we're at and where the market's at and where we're heading, what's going to be crucial to the path and crucial to technologies, AI and the automation. This is the way we see it, I guess. So we're looking at things like advanced metering and monitoring, AI data science and real-time forecasting, and how we pull various assets together. So some sites and some, some sites may have solar, they may have storage, but they also have, the opportunity to flex and monetize assets on the site, their machinery, and through their production and manufacturing cycles. So there's lots of different ways, and there's lots of different opportunities in the market and within AMO to be able to actually pull different assets and different money and revenue streams together. So it's really about matching flexibility to markets and services, and sort of working with an organisation, or understanding the market yourself to understand where to best pull these sources and where you're going to get the flexibility from in order to sort of really optimise the revenue that's available to you and your business. Virtual power plants and microgrids obviously being touched on earlier as well. So in terms of, intelligent control and, flexibility, so it's enabling this, I guess. So if we look at traditional approaches versus, today's new intelligent controlled approaches, so quite often when we're talking to people in the market, there's this fear of, and particularly when we talk about flexibility and flexing assets, there's a fear of the past. So, several years ago, we had multiple more events in terms of FCAS, using FCAS as an example. And in addition to that, the type of automation and the way we went about things was quite limited. So we were really, at some points and on a lot of sites, we weren't able to actually really hone in and look at asset level control. It was more of a flip the switch, the whole site goes down. Obviously, that's problematic. It can create problems to not only production cycles, but obviously long-lasting problems to machinery as well. So there's been a big shift in technology, particularly bringing AI into the mix. But I guess some of the big things to sort of take into consideration are we're no longer ignoring asset limitations. We're working with the assets and their constraints to be able to make sure that we're keeping the production cycles in mind, but in addition to that, we're optimizing the flexibility and the revenue streams that are available. Other things in the past were limiting, lowest value schemes. So now you're actually able to participate in multiple schemes through optimization and using the right, working with the right software and aggregators, and I guess ignoring customers' production schedules, which I touched on, which is a big thing that comes up when we start to talk to people about demand response and flexibility. Often there's a real concern around not wanting to interrupt production schedules, but the beauty of technology now and where we are is that most of the time, and I would say in terms of when we're talking to people, probably 80 to 90% of the time, there's a way to work around it because of the types of schemes and the types of flexibility that are on the market now. In terms of high level around the technology and the types of things you should look for, is trading and optimization capability. So whether it's a long-term market data, market intelligence, site data, or short-term data, you really want to combine that and make sure you're working with a company that has energy traders. So that domain goes to the knowledge and the market knowledge, and then the software is put in place to optimize all of your assets, all of your load, and automate it so that we can get the best return on your assets, or whatever they may be. So in terms of advanced optimization, what good looks like, and this is just an example of how things should flow, and the best sort of services out there would be to, one, look at auditing. Sorry, I just need to move my screen over. You need to look at auditing, so having a holistic look at your site, your production cycles, what the assets are that you're looking to optimize, whether it be solar, whether it be batteries, whether it be, as I said, the assets on site, EV charging stations, all those sorts of things. So we look at that, then look at how we onboard and bring all those things together. Forecasting is crucial. That's where the AI technology comes into it, because there's lots of ways to go about flexing and monetizing assets, but forecasting is a huge thing. Obviously that optimization and creating a schedule, putting in the controls, and then obviously the final part is settlement. So looking to find a partner where you're going to be able to optimize everything is going to be key to be able to optimize, I guess, your revenue streams. Look, this is just a little bit about GridBeyond. We are a company that was founded 16 years ago in Ireland. We're a global company now. We're in the US, UK, Japan, Australia, most recently Canada. We've been in the Australian market now for about 15 months. And yeah, that's probably it. Thank you. Thanks for listening, everybody.
Thank you very much, Lisa, and thank you very much, Ed. And also thank you very much, Gabrielle. Before that, we're on to questions now, so we might put everybody up on the screen. We've got a lot of great questions, and we've just had a poll on the AEMO. Should they have the power to switch off rooftop solar? Pretty damn close. 98 votes versus 96, yes and no. So a bit of a philosophical question there. Now, Gabrielle, I'm going to ask for sort of short and brief as possible answers to the question, so we can get through as many as possible. But Gabrielle, you've got strong views about this switching off of solar. Do you just want to? What do you make of the survey results? 51% versus 49%. Counting did commence before the closure of polls, one has to admit, so it might have been slightly skewed then. But Gabrielle, any thoughts?
I think that probably the result is indicative of the fact that we have not had any technical analysis, cost benefit analysis, or due process from AEMO about putting these rooftop solar cutoffs in place. So they started in South Australia. The then CEO of AEMO went on the 7:30 report and said that AEMO needed to have the ability to cut off people's rooftop solar in the case that South Australia was islanded. Now, this is very important because there was a specific case made for South Australia. There were no technical reports ever released. There was no cost benefit analysis. There was no exploration of alternative options, but the case was made because at least until the second interconnector, Energy Connect, that's being constructed to New South Wales at the moment, was complete, AEMO needed this provision. However, this was one of those thin end of the wedge situations where AEMO then went to Western Australia, and I'm prepared to consider Western Australia as a special case because it is a remote islanded grid all of its own. But now we've seen it Queensland, and now they're talking about Victoria. No one has ever seen any technical analysis. No one has ever been, AEMO has never discussed what are all the reasons why, cost benefit analysis, all the reasons why this should be put in place. And so I think it's an important matter of transparency and accountability. And the new AEMO CEO, Daniel Westerman, his first speech after I'd published a report talking about the problems with the solar cutoffs in South Australia, said that AEMO were going to do things differently, be more consultative, be more transparent and open, and we have not seen that happen.
Okay. Thank you very much for that. Look, just a couple of other questions coming around. Bernie has asked a few interesting ones. One I'm just going to pick up there is, when will variable replace intermittent when talking about renewable energy? Good question, Bernie. We always try at Renew Economy to call it variable. I think variable and intermittent are terms used by varying say philosophical positions on renewable energy. Ed and Lisa, which do you prefer to use? You're going to have to come off mute.
Tough one. Which term would I like to use if I had to go with that? Variable is probably the term that I'll go with.
I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah,
it seems to have a connotation, doesn't it? I mean, it's basically the same thing, but it's just really sort of, it's kind of whether you're sort of supporting it or not. Anyway, here's another quick question too, and it relates to the first of our polls, and it's a good point. Many people have a fetish for the 100% renewables. What is wrong with 90% renewable and offsets for the remaining 10%? Have you got any views on that one?
Look, I would say that there's nothing wrong with that, as long as it aligns with the wider strategy. And I agree, there can be, in some cases, a kind of fixation with that because it's a 100%, it's 100% number. But at the end of the day, I think the target, the wider strategy, as long as anything that aligns with a wider strategy, I think it should be still okay.
Well, the climate goals, yes. And I think it's fair to say that the last 5 or 10%, particularly the last 5%, is the difficult part. So, but I'd probably be a bit more reluctant to go too much on offsets, seeing there are questions about those. Questions about sort of who owns the network and some of the incentives there. I don't know whether Lisa wants to have a go at this one, or Gabrielle. Put up your hand if you interested. Have a quick response, because it's an interesting one. It's I noticed WA, for instance, and Queensland, both state-owned, probably both the slowest off the mark, but now they've decided to go for it, particularly in WA, pretty quick. They can just push all the buttons, control all the buttons that they need to.
So I always cite Western Power as the best example of a forward-thinking DNSP anywhere in the world. They really did some deeply thought-through strategy. They recognized that a whole lot of their assets were coming to the end of life, and they did the analysis, and I won't have the exact number, but something like 60% of their line length was serving 5% of their customer base. And they recognised, when we're talking about remote and regional parts of Western Australia, we now have rooftop solar and we have battery storage, and that poles and wires are no longer the most efficient and economic way to serve those customers. So they've developed what they call a modular grid, which is in Perth. They've got a below ground network, regional towns, and they've got the above ground network. And then in remote areas, they've got either standalone power systems or microgrids, and they are taking down the poles and wires, which also has the added benefit of reducing bushfire risk in some areas. And I think that has been so well thought through and so forward thinking. And I really think particularly Queensland, but the rest of the NEM really needs to consider if it should be doing the same. Just for the Queensland example, we know we've got over $500 million cross subsidy every year from Southeast Queensland to the rest of the state. There's questions about jobs. I think there would be just as many jobs in maintaining the SAPs and the microgrids as the current poles and wires. It's just a matter of doing the analysis and thinking differently about how it could operate.
Lisa, do you have anything to add on that one? No, it's okay. We can move on to the other questions.
Sorry, I'm just, sorry.
You're struggling. I shouldn't throw it to. Okay, next one. A vehicle to grid could be a game changer. Why aren't we pushing this harder? Asks Kelvin. And I think it's an interesting question too. I'm guessing the answer, either Ed or Gabrielle, is because most of the charging protocols used by the main EV makers don't have vehicle to grid capabilities.
I'll jump in. So I think this is a absolutely massive opportunity, and there are a lot of trials underway now. And in fact, Origin, which I would say of our large energy companies is the most switched on, if you'll excuse the bad pun, about distributed energy resources. And they are aiming to have 5,000 EVs under management by 2026. They've got an ARENA grant for 1,000 of those vehicles. There's huge opportunities here. It's one of those, we're at the trial stage and at the assessing the opportunity stage. I think it will ramp up very quickly as soon as we get more EVs into the system. And also we obviously need the costs of vehicle to grid to come down. But the potential there is enormous.
Okay.
I'll let Ed jump in.
Well, let's just move on to the next question. Ed, maybe one for you there. What does it look like, sort of trading and sort of two-way involvement from consumers going into the grid? I mean, is it going to take up a lot of their time? Should it be structured in such a way that it doesn't take up so much of their time? Yes.
Absolutely. I think if the consumers are expected to do the trading, then you can be rest assured that it's just not going to work because they've got a lot of other things on their plate. I think there has to be a technological improvement in that segment. I think that there has to be ways where either it's taken care by a third party that's allocated by the consumer in some other way. There could be maybe some energy retailers who could offer those services to consumers, how they can potentially trade energy. But I'm a firm believer that you can't expect consumers to take care of trading of energy. Yeah. But at the same time, if it's easier, if somehow that process can be made easier, where they can pick and choose and they can decide somehow, and I guess if we can do that, which I guess comes back to the technological improvements again, then I think they can do it themselves also.
Yeah. Well, I think it probably comes down to the fact that people get a headache just looking at their bills once every 3 months. Having to look at their bills once every 5 minutes might be a different thing. But Gabrielle, it probably comes down to also this idea about sort of handing over power or allowing other people to kind of orchestrate your resources, because if it is going to be automated, and we've seen this in virtual power plants, particularly in some of the ones that are being managed, basically you're sort of signing away half your capacity to a third party. And I guess people might be happy to do that, but maybe not.
I think there's a couple of really important points here. One is that any of this participation should be voluntary. So while I'm talking about a sharing energy economy, that's to draw a parallel with car sharing or Airbnb. You do not have to have any of your devices controlled by anyone that you don't want to have them controlled by. This is really an opportunity for consumers to reduce their bills or earn additional revenue from those distributed energy resources, whether it's your battery or your EV or your hot water system. So that's very important. And we don't necessarily need, large proportion of consumers participating to get a lot of the benefits as well. The other thing is, it is going to be very challenging for consumers to be able to assess if they're getting a good deal out of participating in a virtual power plant. And this is really a challenge for AER in terms of consumer protections. They had a hard job when they are obliged to offer a comparison of retail offers, and then they had to incorporate solar into that. And now you've got virtual power plants and a whole lot of other aggregation offers. But I think, one would hope that we can get sufficient competition so that people will be able to compare those offers. And you would hope that in future you'll see differentiation in the market. So there'll be people that will want their EV or be able to have their EV available a lot more of the time to be able to use as a grid resource, compared to the people who are just like, well, occasionally you can access my EV battery and that's fine. It remains to be seen how all of this plays out, but we need the regulators to keep a close eye to ensure that, consumers are getting value for all of their resources participating in these markets. And we also need, the diversity of competition to provide the choice to consumers about what kind of participation they want to have.
Okay. Just another couple of quick questions before we go, because we almost run out of time. This one, two from anonymous attendees. I wonder if that's one of our energy ministers, Chris Bowen, perhaps doing some sort of pre-polling. Bringing rooftop PV from WA to the NEM is the equivalent of a 2-hour battery. Is this a silly question, a notion? I'm going to take a stab at that one and say if it's just for rooftop PV, then it probably is a silly notion, because you could probably build a 2-hour battery of that size for less cost. But it does go to the point about if you are going to build high voltage transmission lines, then it really does matter about being and we've had this bit of a raging debate on Renew Economy over the last couple of weeks, with people just sort of questioning exactly how many transmission lines do we need? Are we talking about sort of sourcing things from different areas? Do we get sort of different outputs in solar and wind in different parts of the grid? We can rest assured that in WA it will be different, but will it actually manage the cost? And that's probably something for somebody else to consider. Another one from our anonymous attendee, possibly a energy minister or two. Does the Albanese government need to undertake an Inflation Reduction Act style spending package to rapidly transition our grid? or will slow and steady do the job? Ed, this is a tricky one for you, but I'm just going to throw it your way anyway, and maybe to Gabrielle afterwards. But I mean, I guess the question is, we've got the Rewiring the Nation thing, support with sort of first investment rollout on that this week. It's a $20 billion spend. Do we really just need to have to accelerate the whole thing to get this job done?
In my opinion, yes. It's got to be accelerated. If we are looking at the kind of targets that we've set ourselves, then the only logical way to look at that is that we're going to have to look at ways that we can accelerate the investments in this. But at the same time, it has to be balanced. But if I have to give, if it's a yes or a no answer, mine is a firm yes.
Okay. Gabrielle, would you like to add a bit more context around that one?
So of the 6 strands of recommendations for the package of energy ministers in November, I think the 2 that require significant investment are both the flexible demand and the behind the meter storage. I know there's been a lot of reluctance to look at using the SRES for batteries and the like, but if you look at what the sleeping duck does in terms of putting a whole lot of storage in the system, complements the rooftop solar perfectly, and because it's behind the meter, to go to your earlier question, that means less use of both the distribution network and the transmission network. And so we can reduce our network costs. And, you know, no one's looked at what we might be able to reduce our transmission spend on if we put significant investment into DER. That's definitely, for any analyst listening, a challenge to go out to you to try and do that modelling. I think it's really significant to think about what we can do within the existing grid. We will need definitely, particularly some intrastate transmission to the renewable energy zones. I'm less convinced that we need the extent of additional transmission between states. That's the really large and costly transmission that AEMO is very much in favour of.
Okay. Look, guys, I think we're going to have to leave it there. Can I just get confirmation, though, Gabrielle, and from Ed, whether there's a few questions about whether the slides will be available. And I've sort of said yes. And I could see you nodding, Gabrielle, so that's good.
I've put it in the chat. Yes, we'll
okay.
definitely make the slides available on IEFA's website and social media. And
social media, and therefore also through us as well too, because we'll probably put a link of this recording of this up on our website. I think that's part of the agreement, and those slides will be there. And both presentations have some fantastic slides, which will be excellent reference material. Look, thanks everyone for joining the webinar. We had quite a big attendance. A few people have now left to do other things and go to lunch, but thank you very much for GridBeyond for sponsoring this and co-hosting this webinar. Really fantastic to have Lisa and Ed joining us, and I'm so sorry that Lisa was sort of under the weather. Thanks also to Gabrielle Kuiper, Special Advisor to IEFA and one of the country's biggest, foremost energy experts. Fantastic to have both your presentations, all your presentations. And thanks to everybody out there for participating in this webinar. My name is Giles Parkinson. I'm the editor of Renew Economy and its associated websites, the Driven, the EV Focus, the Driven, One Step Off the Grid, and also take a look at our new subsite called Switched On, which focuses on electrification, because that's a subject which appears to be close to the heart of many of the people here. Sorry we couldn't get to all your questions. We will try and respond to them if I think we can later on. But anyway, that's it for now, and look forward to catching up at the next webinar. Bye for now.
Thank you, everybody. Bye.